Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larson. On this episode, we get to have Sal Sferlazza from Ninja One and many other startups and all sorts of interesting things. Sal, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, happy to do it. Glad to be here.
So I think you've had a super interesting background. I've got so many questions for you. But for people, let's start with Ninja One. For people that don't know Ninja One, can you explain what it is? Can you tell us about some stats, like how much you've raised, or what valuation, how big the company is, any of those things that are public?
Yeah, so Ninja's probably one of the fastest growing companies you never heard of. We're in the B2B IT space. We recently raised a round at a valuation of $5 billion from CapG and Iconic Capital as well. And we focus predominantly around providing software that managed service providers and internal IT departments can use to effectively run their internal networks.
For people who aren't familiar with that, can you help break it down to just some entrepreneur or some fund manager listening today who isn't familiar with how that part of the market works or what that service offering looks like day to day?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're an internal IT department, one of the things that are clear is that IT tools are getting more complex. There is this entire movement in the IT space around IT wallet consolidation, where people want to spend less money. Surprise move. They want to spend less money and things to be more automated and to save budget while retaining exceptional business continuity for their internal employees. So that's what Ninja actually does. We work silently and transparently in the background. For those that are technical, there's a never-ending list of heterogeneous devices floating around that present a security risk to those companies. So the introduction of mobile phones has made things more interesting. Then you look at IoT devices and the never-ending end of embedded systems that have to be monitored and managed, and they all present a significant security risk. So Ninja actually patches those devices, monitors, and allows you to remediate those.
Yeah. Who is, I know you serve all sorts of different kinds of customers, but who's an ideal customer for you?
It's a tough question because we actually have done incredibly well across geos. We have a wonderful business in EMEA and the United States and different segments. So we started out our journey servicing the managed service providers, which are basically outsource IT for the small, medium business. But very quickly, we've seen Signal growing into the mid-market and the enterprise. So our ideal customer could be 50 employee company, or it could be 100,000 employee company. So we've been fortunate enough to see success at every level.
Well, congrats on that.
Thanks.
I actually have a bunch of questions about product market fit and getting things perfect and moving up to the next scale and customer demand and these 10 things. Maybe before we jump into that though, can you talk about your entrepreneurial journey? I mean, we have so many listeners that are interested in how to grow a $1 billion company. And for you, you've had, all these different entrepreneurial successes before this one. Can you talk about a few of those?
Yeah, I mean, I think being an entrepreneur, one of the things is you have to feel the pain directly or know how to find pain. So for me, early in my journey, I built and sold an e-learning and training software in a video game company. But very quickly, when I got into internal IT and actually had to win there, I felt that staying where your subject matter expertise lies gives you an unfair advantage, both from prior customer relationships and the ability to, find pain, even if you're not feeling it directly. So the last several startups that I've done have all been in the same space. And throughout that journey, you basically find the next startup idea as you kind of go along. So that's been really helpful over the years.
Yeah. And tell us about your other couple you've got now besides Ninja One.
One that I'm only on the board of now is a company called Boostlingo, which is still running, doing a great job. It's a B2B interpreting application that services predominantly medical, and they're doing quite well as well. But I'm actually don't have an active role there, although I was one of the founders of the company. In past lives, I built backup disaster recovery products and other products that are somewhat adjacent or similar to Ninja in the past. So I think again, leveraging those prior experiences is key for future success for sure.
Yeah. When you think about the critical elements for going from a good company to a multi-billion-dollar company, let's start with this. To go from a company in the tens of millions to the hundreds of millions, what do you think are some of the key levers or patterns that you see as companies grow that extra decimal point?
I think there's always a propensity by some entrepreneurs to and I think I'll say this in sort of my market. There's a propensity to look and come down from the mountain and dictate the way the world should be. And there's a few of those entrepreneurs, and those are the most richest and most successful people in the entire world, in the top 20 people. But for me, as an incremental innovation entrepreneur, I think staying close to the customer and listening to customer signal. So, one of the things that our Ninja, the culture is pretty flat. I demand that even the lowest level employees in the company escalate product problems to me and share customer pain. So, I mean, I talk to customers almost on a weekly basis. So I think be able to assert, we laugh because I've had roadmap items that I want to build because my other day job is also running products besides being the CEO, which is where my heart really lies. And I can't build them because the customers won't let me. They're providing so much signal that's leading us the way from going from tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars. Unfortunately, I have to follow that signal so I could play with toys at another time. So I think that's one of the things is listening to your customers, listening to the signal, and running fast and building quickly. And I think, in a hyper growth motion, one of the things that I think about is there's times when we could have went to market faster, and I've made my marketing friends really frustrated over the years because they're trying to plan out the next release of the next feature of the product, and it's like, what's the release date? Well, the release date is when it's ready, because another thing as you transition from tens of millions to hundreds of millions and ultimately to billions is the reputational damage that you could do. It takes years to build trust with your customers and a day to lose it. So I think it takes a lot of discipline to say, well, maybe we could grow 15% faster and the product gets out a little earlier. And I think that's not I think it takes a lot of restraint not to go for the growth, but ultimately it pays off in the end, right? So
Yeah. Um, I think one of my favorite guests on here, Steve Blank, teaches at Stanford. The lean startup movement was based on him, and he built multiple startups. His last one he sold for 8 billion, and like you guys sound like echoes of each other. I mean, like he's just like he's just like so like you guys would get along so well because he's just like the answers are not in this room around this table. The answers are out there at our customers' table. Like, what are we
that's
doing
right.
here? Kids talk to them, not each other.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's so true. And I'm blown away by the Bezos and all the tier zero entrepreneurs that will be able to craft the world the way the future will look. But I'm doing okay. But in my world, it's we got to listen to the customers first. It
You know
works
what
well.
though? Steve pokes some holes in their myths that like Steve Jobs doesn't do customer satisfaction. He says, Steve loved to say that on stage, but he's like, I live down the street from Steve. Like I can't tell you how many times I walked past the Cupertino Apple store and Steve is in there talking with customers. So
Yeah,
the myth that Steve Jobs didn't do that,
there
he
you
said,
go.
doesn't actually quite match up with
That's
reality.
funny. Maybe I'm not as far away as I think. Yeah.
Um, and then what about this? So excited, get a company to $100 million valuation. What do you see as maybe some critical things or some common things of getting from that first $100 million valuation to, 50 times larger at 5 billion?
I think there's a significant transformation that happens in the organization over the last few years, right? So, and I call it camp counselor, because you have the folks that help you get you where you were, to help you get. It's really hard to go from 0 to 100, right? And I'm not saying it's not hard on our path to a billion in ARR, but that 0 to 100 is incredibly hard, and the blood, sweat, and tears that those folks put in, and we've seen people scale incredibly well as the organization gets bigger. But you need reinforcements. You need people that have seen, and not just people that worked at large companies, people that have seen that hyper growth motion, which is a very specialized skill set. And then the people that have seen that hyper growth motion need to be able to think outside the box and say, well, this use case worked great for this hyper growth journey, but that was a different economy. It was a different product. It was a different ASP. How do we apply those learnings to this hyper growth motion called Ninja? So, and I think that, that me as the CEO trying to mediate, I make a joke. I'll have employees like, Ninja never did it this way. I was like, well, 3 years ago, Ninja was like a fifth of the employee count and it doesn't scale anymore. And then it's been fun to see there's other novel inventions or go-to-market motion or product levers that we've pulled that have scaled wonderfully. And new people come in and say, what is this? What is this thing? We don't really understand it. and they get to love and appreciate all the fun stuff and the core that, that we've built, that we consider in some ways, how we run the organization is intellectual property itself, especially with a significant go-to-market motion. So it's been fun.
So one of my close friends, we trade some coaching, like he coaches me on my business, I coach him on his. He's definitely getting the short end of the stick. But we were talking a couple of days ago, and he's just secured, another several $100 million in funding and needs to hire many hundreds of people like yesterday.
Yeah.
In a position like that, what advice would you have for him as he's, he has the cash to do it, he needs to do it, but it took him many years to get their first couple hundred employees, and now they're, more than 4 times in the company immediately just to meet their new obligations.
Yeah, I mean, we're this is my general advice across any department, not just recruiting, is that I think, maybe because I was a software engineer for 16 years, I get personally involved, and I want to understand an excruciating level of detail in any group that I'm involved in. So, right now we're recruiting, we're only hiring 500 to 600 new heads plus, positive attrition and promotion. So we're probably going to hire 700 people this year. Okay. And, you look back at, 2020, we're like 130 people. So, I mean, I think staying ahead in the scaling, I think specifically we're recruiting, I think the referral network is huge. So I'm personally going on the engineering all hands leadership and saying, we're giving referral. Who are the best and brightest minds you ever worked with in your career, and why are they not working at Ninja? So referral network is the only way, in my opinion, that you can get there, because you shortcut the mean time to trust when you recruit someone, right? You meet, sometimes they blow your socks off in 3 weeks, but sometimes it really takes a few months to get to know them, and then you get to increase their scope and open up the aperture in terms of what they own. But I think the referral network is the only way you can get there. So I still personally recruit people like in various groups. If I meet someone, I just recruited one of our best engineers I probably met in my life through social circles, and you just got to keep your eyes open.
So this is a commonality I hear amongst so many of you folks that have grown your companies over the billion mark, is like recruiting doesn't end. Recruiting is an ongoing process. You getting the absolute top people in this organization and, singing from the same sheet of music, it's just, they consider set the vision, raise the money, get the absolute best people in here singing from the same sheet of music. When you think about that philosophy, especially when there's pressures, like we've got to grow, and when you think about the nuances of like getting absolute superstars to come over to you, what's some of the advice you have for other founders who are trying to basically like get that next level up individual?
Yeah, I think it gets easier as the brand gets better. When you're small, you're selling hopes and dreams, and it's a lot harder. I have to say we've been pretty spoiled now, particularly the last year, now that we announced our fundraising and get to do great podcasts like these and stuff. They're all incrementally help. And someone that gravitates towards product, as I said before the interview, that generally doesn't do interviews, I see the value, because the more you get out there, the easier it gets. So I think get out there, build your brand perhaps earlier. There's some advantages to not building your brand earlier. You get to kind of fly under the radar and build your stack and build in a strong competitive advantage, which has been Ninja's path. But there's also a downside, which, if I sort of I do a lot of retrospective on what decisions would I have done differently. There is some benefit to building your brand earlier, because you can attract the high power talent earlier and quicker. So, but no complaints here. It worked out just fine. Yeah. But yeah.
What about when you have to go to a new geo? Like, somebody, they have they have a location specific project that needs to get staffed. You look at these $15 billion chip plants being built or something. That's maybe not quite on that scale, but somebody they need a few hundred people at a new location where, their team's not from. What do you think about a situation like that?
I think we're things things you could touch is a little bit different, as a lot heavier footprint and cost. For Ninja, most of the motions in these new geos are go-to-market motion. So you could start small, so I'll use me as an example. When we opened it, we literally I was talking about this earlier today. We had 5 people in the office, right, for the first 6 months. So we went 5, 18, 34, 200. Now we're like at 600 and growing. So I think, I think for me, looking as I look for new growth levers, there's always the ability to build new products, but new geos, uh, creating, placing these bets early and often and looking, we're looking for a large expansion in Asia and other areas in LATAM, which is particularly hard to reach. But the there's GDP there to be had, and we need to make those investments. When we were small, we had to make hard trade-offs. We could only focus on the absolute biggest geos. Like, for example, when we went to EMEA, we only went and we found the most wonderful German leader, Andre Schindler, who's the GM of all EMEA. And because we had his help, we were able to go to Germany. We're like the only U.S. company that doesn't go to London. We go to Germany first, and the next country was UK, and that's all we did. But now we don't have to choose. So we have localized languages in every part of Europe. So I think start small with a fast follow if there's signal. And I think one of the things at our size, it's not usually typical to be founder led. So we've been really blessed that we've taken a super pragmatic approach to expansion, and also not growing faster than we could because we want to do reputational damage, which plays into gross retention, right? And being thoughtful about geos and the culture nuances for the areas that we go into. Like, for example, we're going into Japan right now. We want to make sure the product is exceptionally ready from a localization standpoint because, they're not going to accept a subpar, translation to go into that market. So we need to do it right. So, and if it takes time, that's fine. But once we get signal there, we're going to very aggressively ramp up staff.
What's an example of localization that you feel like maybe not everyone else does that you're looking to do? Say, we can use Japan as an example.
I think it's understanding the culture nuances, the selling motion, and the pattern recognition. It's all a little bit different. Like even in EMEA, the competitive landscape is actually quite different there, and the buyer persona is very, they're directionally the same, right? Or else we wouldn't be able to sell a product there, but they definitely vary enough that you have to be careful, and you have to, like for example, in France, like we toyed a lot with should we open an office in Paris because in-person meetings are much more of a requirement perhaps than other countries. In Japan, I think I don't want to comment too much because we're still getting our sea legs. We've been fortunate, Garrett Wassinger is the chairman of the board of CrowdStrike, is actually on the Ninja board. So he has a lot of experience over his career, working in Japan. So we're leaning heavily on advisors that have been there, done that, and just trying to learn as much as we can.
Yeah. I want to talk about product market fit.
Sure.
Start with, how do you define it yourself? I know there's so many different definitions that are somewhat similar, but they all seem to have a nuance.
Yeah, maybe it's my blue collar roots. I always think like product market fit. Will customers buy the product that I'm building? And my brain always goes towards, ease of use. So, and that's just the way that the DNA that I've been wired since I was a kid. So you'll laugh at a $5 billion company. The final decision for all product design is myself. So I'll look at a UI and I'll say, this is too complex. Or if I don't understand, how could our customers don't understand it? We're not a consumer product, so my mom doesn't need to understand it. We're in IT, we're a technical product, but I think if you could reduce the training time and the friction in people adopting your product, man, like it really makes a huge difference, right? So I think that's things I think about almost every day, which is certainly want our products to be highly scalable and secure, but easy use is in itself is IP. And I think others try to fake it and put the latest web technology in front of their product to make it look prettier. But how the entities are saved in your app and how they work and the interplay of those things, I think is part of the Ninja secret sauce. So,
yeah. When you think about a question that, a founder or CEO can ask themselves to reduce friction or maybe a lens they need to be looking at, any advice for people to maybe push themselves further on this reducing friction for the customer?
I think, and I said this earlier, is like, I go to high, say if a CEO flies at 10,000 feet in some areas and 5,000, I want to fly at 1,000 feet. And it's hard to do, maybe because we're software and because I'm technical, I could do that. But I think, I could just give a few examples. Like if someone goes to our website they must get an answer in 5 or 10 minutes like that. So I look at the buyer's journey, right, from the top of funnel all the way through retention. You know, our our sales cycle for small customers sometimes is 1 day or 3 weeks. But we're also selling other customers that we might be building a 6 month relationship or a year relationship. So I think, how long was it taking to get onboarded? How long till they deploy their first piece of our software? How long till they're fully deployed? We've had some really interesting opportunities just to sort of laugh about is, we've had customers that have 100,000 endpoints, or sort of people that they're indirectly managing, and they move from one competitor to another, and it took them a year to move half of their estate. In Ninja, they moved everybody in 90 days. So like that's the example. And that once you get a taste of that, how is your product licensed and consumed? A lot of products, they're very guarded and restricted on how they could be consumed. We don't lock anything down in Ninja because I don't want to create any friction in them using my products. I'm certainly going to charge them once they consume it, but I'll do that once they have a material amount of consumption. We have a great deal for you. But generally, we don't like to lock things down because we find that our customers are curious. They like to explore. They find new features. They use them, and either we'll slap them on the wrist and say, "Hey, you got to turn it off," which we could, or we could tell them about a wonderful opportunity to add a new product to the products they're consuming. So that's just a few examples, but there's a lot more. The way I think about friction.
Yeah. What are other principles for creating higher and higher levels of product market fit that you feel like have been effective for you and your companies?
Yeah, I mean, the product fit will also change based on the markets that we're in. So right now, for example, like we sell to the outsource IT of the SMB. So those are consultants, right? They're paying a fee to handle all the IT, and then we're also selling internal IT departments that are helping making their employees more efficient and that sort of thing. So I think other tools for product fit. I mean, I hate to go back to customer conversations, but like I'm the CEO, still talking to multiple customer conversations per week. I've been in organizations where some product managers don't even talk to customers or barely talk to customers. Like just for any product or feature that Ninja builds, sometimes we're talking hundreds if it's a product. So it's not just online surveys, and they're actually on purpose in different segments and different markets. And what you look at is like, what's the overlap of all those segments, markets, and geos? And that's the sweet spot, right? You build that first, and then everything else follows to optimize, how many of your people you're converting from the top of the funnel and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Listen, I don't think you should be apologizing at all for customer service. I got really into like lean operational excellence and went to Japan and did the Toyota tours and stuff like this. And like a fundamental reason that Toyota came out of nowhere and became the number one car company in the world, and all the Americans had to catch up, is customer conversations. And so many of the billion-dollar founders on here are like, they sound like you. So I don't think you need to apologize for that at all. If anything, I want to go deeper and want to hear for you, like, what's a rookie mistake on customer conversations and what makes a great customer conversation?
Well, I think, and maybe it's more art than science, is how do you separate needs versus wants? So I still co-own product, with my partners, Rahul and Matt, and some of our product managers will say, hey, there's 987 votes in our customer community for this feature. So I said, why don't you do a cohort analysis, and when those customers signed up, you have to know how to ride that line, because if you build all the wants, you're not going to get bigger. So, and I think the things that they really need, and it's a consensus-based approach as a result of those surveys and customer conversations. So you can't take a snowflake and use it as the basis for a new product or a new feature. You got to get consensus from the larger set, right? And it means that some customers may not be happy in the short term, right? And you can't make every customer happy, but I can tell you one thing, we're making more customers happy than we're not. So we'll keep doing that. But I would say the art is need versus wants. Like how do you really thread the needle there?
I would ask the same question about investors. How much do you think you've raised total across your life, and then how much total in Ninja?
Without being too specific, I would say I've probably raised more in Ninja than all the other startups combined that I've done. But I think always with a mind's eye, it's towards capital efficiency. So
Yeah.
I think
What do you think
that's
the
just
ninja
how.
money, the ninja total approximate is of how much you raised? Or if you're not public, don't feel like you need to share it.
Oh, we're not public right now, but we can, I could tell you we just did a, $500 million round of 5 billion.
Perfect.
But yeah.
So, this is of endless fascination to our audience who are both founders and the ones who are fund managers. Um,
Yes.
when you think about raising $500 million, let's start with rookie mistake. What are rookie mistakes you see?
Um, Chasing valuation at all costs. I mean, I think the quality of the investors, we've been thrilled with both CapG and Iconic and some as our original investors. And at different stages, those investors can be more and more helpful. So I think, when you get bigger, I think from an investor lens, I think the entrepreneurs know what is the true value that this investor can provide. From a founder, the same goes. Does plus or 10% valuation really make a difference? So you're being penny wise, pound foolish. You're chasing an absurd valuation. And generally, as someone that's been in Silicon Valley for 16 years before moving to Austin, there's no free lunch, right? So there's some concession somewhere buried in that definitive agreement that will cause you to lose control of the company or have to do unnatural acts that you don't want to do in the future. So I think a rookie mistake is, focus on control because you have a vision and the investors are investing in for a reason. And B, make sure that they're providing at the stage you are now the value that you need, right? So, yeah. So just to give an example of Iconic, they've been an absolutely wonderful partner, and they have some incredible relationships. And they invested a while ago, and we're starting to sell quite well into the upper mid-market enterprise, but they kind of talked about, hey, we could provide introductions. And I was like, my product's not ready, so I have to put those relationships on layaway until it's appropriate to use them. But they had a lot of superpowers that added value day one, right? So I think there needs to be a frank assessment by the entrepreneur, especially a first-time entrepreneur that's never done it before. It's easy to see through rose-colored glasses and maybe miss the mark.
Yeah. Do I understand that you had some nice provisions in this round to help you and your co-founder have some more control or have some more certainty for the future?
Our investors have been supportive and all the way back to Summit to having minority stakes. So me and Chris control the board, which has been wonderful. And we treat our investors like as part of the Ninja team. So, and I think I'm very focused on our fiduciary to them and to make sure that I would never give them pause that I'm not being a good steward of their capital. And I think that's another advice for an entrepreneur. I think transparency, builds trust. And, it sounds cliche, but it's true. And if you try to hide your dirty laundry, it's just going to come back to bite you later on. So I think we take that control with a great responsibility.
Yeah, makes sense. What do you think people get wrong when they're fundraising such large amounts that when it comes to the relationship with the individual and so often I don't hear people talk like you talk about they're really going to be part of the family. There can be so often an adversarial relationship with potential funders, or it's like, this is my team on the basketball team, that's your team, and I'm going to try and get the highest valuation in this. And why do you think there can be such an adversarial nature in raising large amounts?
Well, I mean, obviously the valuation could create a point of contention later on. And if you have someone that's raising at the absolute highest valuation at all costs, certainly it's going to create friction. But I've been pretty spoiled because I have a pretty great relationship with our board. And I think the way I look at it as an entrepreneur, I have a certain amount of energy that I could spend per week. And if I had to spend that energy fighting with investors, and I was in Silicon Valley, and I would talk to other entrepreneurs battling with investors on a weekly or monthly basis. And I'm like, I'm spending all that time building product. So, I need people that are going to help reduce friction in the adoption of my product, not having that battle. So, I mean, I think I get exhausted just hearing what you said. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to open it up a little bit. When you think about principles for building a multi-billion-dollar company on any subject, just what's something people don't talk about enough, or what's a soapbox issue for you, or what do you want to talk about?
I talk about I'll kind of dig in on culture a little bit. When I look at, I used to have, when I still do a lot of interviews, but when I see a resume, if I'd see 1 year tenure, I would just throw the resume in the garbage, right? And what I realized over the last couple of years is that these 1 year tenure resumes are made on the bed of false promises by other entrepreneurs and other companies. So, and I think, to get exceptional retention, you have to build trust, and you have to have a culture where people enjoy where they go to work. So I think, culture is yet again another ninja superpower. So I mean, I think we are incredibly organizationally flat. So like I'll say things like, just for an example, like I do a meet the CEO. So any new employee every month, imagine, and you might have heard we just acquired a company called Dropsuite, that has base of operations like around the world. And I have about 25 hours of meetings just to make sure that these people understand that we care about them and that they're welcome and that they have a voice, right? So I do meet the CEO and I let them answer any question that they want. So now, imagine hiring 700 people a year and we're doing that at scale. And I think, what I would say to them, if you're my new employee that we're joining, is if you're the smartest room and you're always right, you probably shouldn't work at Ninja. Is what I say, is because I don't have all the answers. I'm only as smart as the collective intellect of the entire organization. So make me smarter, and escalate any problem for any reason. Great products win. I don't care what level you are in the company. If there's a problem with the product, I need to know about it. Exceptional communication, and I've worked in various companies over the year where like comms between different departments, there's politics, and between product and engineering, and then engineering and support. And we sort of knock those things down. So we do a lot of snowflake fixtures. Like I have a chief of staff that actually runs all support and enablement, and he has the right, although he never really uses it, to stop any release for any reason. Name an organization where the support person could stop any release for any reason. So he has the badge, right? So I think one of the questions I often get on culture in those meet the CEOs is how do you maintain your culture as you get bigger? And the answer is pretty simple. I have to hire people that think like I do. So they have the servant style leadership as the cornerstone of the culture, is you report to the people that report to you. And I get it. I mean, a lot of people don't have the patience to do. I'm just wired that way, so it's easy for me to do it. And if I get, if the conviction of my arguments are so weak that I have to play the CEO card, that means I'm not. Then it's probably not the right decision. So, although I will do it sometimes, and if it's a coin flip and I'm not sure, I may a little lieutenant that we have to win, because I know it's not going to destroy the whole business. And if they lose, I could use it against them in future arguments.
um, well, I think there's so many people from the outside who they hear culture and it kind of blends in. It sounds like, well, everybody says that. But then you get to meet some entrepreneurs where like, no, it really feels different to work here. When you think about what feels different about working at Ninja, what does feel different? What's special about working at Ninja?
And I think my employees would say this themselves, is that any one of them could grab me in the hall and tell me what's broken with the company, or Slack me directly anywhere around the world. And we really do care. I mean, if we have an employee that's in trouble, we do anything we can to help them. And I think there's other companies that are like-minded that way. Like, for example, I was saying before, I don't like to travel that much, but when I do travel, I go to all our offices. I'll spend the entire week and talk to they already are employees of the company. So it's not, in addition to meet the CEO, I'm spending 10 hours a day meeting with all the teams in those regions. So I'm going to Berlin in the first week in July, and I'll spend in groups with every function of every department and just listen to them for hours, so I can collect feedback. And I think for an employee to operate without fear of management is a really nice thing, that I don't think a lot of companies have. So I think they know that, if they're in a hostile work environment, they know that I won't accept it. So those people will be quickly exit out of the organization. And it doesn't mean we don't, and also at the same time, I also say, because we have a business to run, is that don't take kindness for weakness. So we'll make changes if we need to, but we'll do it in a respectful manner, and we'll move quickly if people aren't performing. So I think, to me, everything's in delivery and providing context. And people say, how did you build this amazing culture? And I always say, well, I read the sign in the back of the door and I was at the doctor's office that said everything I learned in life was in kindergarten. And I think, there's a fire here of people that want to win. And I think being founder led kind of makes it really easy because the best and brightest minds that built this company are still here working and want to see the company to continue to become exceptional.
Yeah. I have another observation of billion and decabillion founders that there's often such a commitment to the fundamentals, and yet other folks who don't get as far, there's a lot of time spent on complexity. Like they're always inventing this new crazy thing, and then I talk to somebody like you who's like, we try to have a culture of the kind of things you learn in kindergarten. We actually interview our customers. Where somebody else would be like, we invented this crazy AI algorithm and it does this and we get this measure back and our data scientists, whatever. And then I hear people like you, like, we talk to customers. How many customers do you think you have globally?
Oh, me? We have 24,000.
Okay.
24,000.
24,000 customers and you're still talking to them. You personally as a CEO are taking the time to talk to them every week. What do you think it is about, this idea of like living the fundamentals at a higher level being a key to success?
Say that again. Living fundamentals. Yeah.
Living fundamentals harder than others is so, it appears to be the key to success often is like taking the fundamentals, but like living it way harder rather than coming up with some crazy algorithmic complexity.
And again, like I'm biased because I'm cut from that cloth, but there is this propensity to overcomplicate things. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on these things or not, but I'll
we can bleep it out.
We could bleep it out later. But it was like we interviewed a finance person years ago. Me and my co-founder Chris were just laughing because he was like a potential CFO candidate, and he's like, "Yeah, we literally had a policy in our employee handbook that says don't do stupid shit." Like that was like their whole policy. It's like, which is pretty funny. And I was like, this guy, I was like, that's kind of how me and Chris think about it. It's like, let's be thoughtful and just keep it simple. There's plenty of work to do, and a lot of the engineering work we do is incredibly complex. Let's say the complexity for that. We like to keep our all hands at meetings. Like I limit the amount of slides that people are allowed to bring to our worldwide leader meetings. Like I say, if it's an all day one, you get 3 slides max. And we meet with the leadership team on a 2-week cadence, have like a closed war room. Like what are the problems of the day? What are the calibrations we need? Bring your thoughts and your strong opinions, leave the slides at home, so you could bring 1 slide, and maybe it doesn't work for every market or every product, but I think, in the software industry, I think it scales pretty well.
Yeah. There's so many smart, ambitious people who live fundamentals, but yet have not achieved what you've achieved. What do you think is different about you? What do you think you've done that maybe not everyone else has done?
I'm a pretty humble guy, so I don't really know, but I would say that I think
you're being like the most unhumble version of yourself, trying to be objective of what somebody who's seen all you've done has seen. What do you think that observes?
Cancel culture. This clip could be put on TikTok and me, right? Yeah, no, and I think to take any credit away from myself, I think right product, right time, product market fit. I think if someone to start Ninja now, and it was an exact carbon copy of myself, they would not be as successful because we're already here. We saw a tremendous hole at the right time with a lot of legacy tools that were built 20 years ago, and the SaaSification of the global software market. We hit it just right. And now we're in a world where there's a highly distributed workforce where people are working in offices and home and all over the globe. And a cloud-first native solution that's easy to consume is just the way it's going. And if you look at, what's going on in the world and people looking for cost savings, the IT and wallet consolidation is real in the market that we're in. People they don't want to log into 25 different products to do their job. They want to log into one. So, we've been the benefactor of some of these moves. You could say it's luck, or you could say it's agility. I would say agility is probably one superpower that I have. And I don't have strong religions about how the company should be run or what we should do. I was having a conversation with our CRO, John, who's actually, built $1 billion business in ServiceNow and inside of Snowflake. And we talked about, sorry, I lost my thought. We talk about strong religions and how to do things. And we have a high velocity sales engine that confuses and baffles and people are in awe of. And now we're having wonderful traction on the upper mid-market and enterprise, which requires a completely new go-to-market motion. And I think there's a lot of concern, not necessarily from John, from all parties intended, that, you know, the entrepreneur gets addicted to this, this is the way you do it. And I think maybe that's a superpower, because I you know, I'll be in an argument in a management meeting and mid-flight change sides because I realize that I'm wrong. And at the end of the day, it's not about egos. It's about my stock value and the company getting bigger that matters. So I think that's a superpower of me. Yeah, because I just don't have any strong religions. I want it, whatever makes sense, right? So
yeah. Speaking about those giant enterprise sales, let's do the same thing again. Let's start with the rookie mistake. What's a rookie mistake you see when people are trying to do a large enterprise deal?
Try to take down the elephant in one bite. and this is emotion we're still learning, is that, you know, there's advocates throughout these organizations that have significant pain, and the sales cycles are much smaller and quicker to close. And don't talk to corporate till you have enough groundswell signal and support, you know, to sort of go for the enterprise, go for the large enterprise deal. So I think and time is on your side. You know, we enjoy such tremendous growth in our core businesses, just like product ship, like we talk about with products. We could take our time, and if we sell that same customer a year later, guess what? The product's going to be another 10% better, which means that people are going to enjoy it more and consume it more. And we're actually already solving pains within these larger organizations in a smaller way. And it's going to effectively our close rate is going to be much higher a year or two later. So I think that's how I think about it.
Yeah. When you think about the top enterprise sales reps you've ever known, or that work at Ninja or otherwise, what are common principles, or what are things that you see about them as opposed to average enterprise sales reps?
Yeah. I mean, well, if I talk about the company, common characteristics is you could never stop building products, you know. And I've had disagreements with people internally in Ninja around how many products should Ninja build. So I was like, if you want to be a one product company, we should probably call it a day. You know, I think if you look at the most successful platform plays in our space, like ServiceNow or CrowdStrike, Datadog, and so forth, I mean, they never stop building product. And, you know, in a world where there's IT and wallet consolidation, there's, in some ways, there's sort of an unlimited amount of serviceable addressable markets that you can go after. So then the discipline goes, what products do you have the right to own in your platform, and which ones should you partner and stay away from? So I think that's also a muscle that you have to develop over time.
Yeah. What are some of the things that tip that balance one direction or the other for you?
We can't be the best at everything. So I think the ones that line closest to our buyer persona are the ones that make the most sense to me. Once you start crossing buyer persona, what happens to your website and the people you're targeting that buys these products? How do you split up your organic and paid spend and your brand, you know, your corporate marketing team, from building a brand perspective? How do they decide which persona is more important, you know, and if it's emerging products? So things get a lot more complex, and we're conscious of the facts that would have to happen. But we think, you know, for at our current size, which is quite large already, there's a lot more juice here for us to, you know, build a wonderful business and kind of stay focused, and it keeps things really clean.
Yeah. Well, this is great. Thanks for spending time with us here.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for taking time. I'd love to catch up with you in Austin next time you're in town.
Yeah. So closing off, like, what do you want to leave people with today?
You know, I think Ninja is a company to watch. You know, we've had pretty humble beginnings, but we're growing at an incredible rate. You know, we're probably in the top 10%, you know, for the companies growing that are in our space globally. And in some ways, we're just getting started, because we're growing into these new markets and expansions, both from an enterprise standpoint and a geo, and we can continue to ship products that our customers enjoy. So I think that'll be all I'd like to leave them with.
Yeah. Well, congrats on all the success.
Thank you, sir. This is fun. Take care.
Okay. Bye, everyone.